Hello, high schoolers. This is Mrs. Trendell here from SCAZA. And before we get into our next topic, let's just do a little review from last week. So last week we talked about the harmful effects of nicotine use. We talked about how it can interfere with a teenager's developing brain, and those effects can be permanent. We also talked about the 4 stages of addiction. Okay, and that just by experimenting one time with drugs, it can lead to addiction. Okay, there are many benefits to staying tobacco-free: fresher breath, whiter teeth, healthier heart and lungs, healthier body. Your breath will be better and you will smell better. Okay, so even though tobacco users can begin to experience these benefits after they quit, it is better to never start using in the first place. Today in our next lesson, lesson number 7, we're going to be looking at truths or consequences, okay, when we talk about the effects of marijuana use. So marijuana. Marijuana is a drug that is the subject of an ongoing debate about its legal status, as well as the effects on your body. So the ongoing discussion about marijuana makes it difficult to understand its true effects, and whether it is safe or unsafe. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the information about marijuana that perpetuates this argument and this debate of whether marijuana is safe or not. Okay, so in our lesson today, we're only going to be discussing recreational marijuana use, not medical marijuana use. You've heard a lot of information about marijuana. It's been in the news and about legalization. So with all this information out there, it can be difficult to know if the information is consistent with scientific facts or just hearsay. All right, so we're going to talk about reliable sources and also whether the things we're hearing are facts or myths. So where can we find reliable information about the effects of marijuana use? Well, a good example of a reliable source for drug information is the National Institute on Drug Abuse, or the NIDA. Okay, that is a good example of a factual resource, okay, for the truth. But what about some examples of unreliable sources? Okay, so some examples are from movies you watch, friends, users or drug users or drug dealers, and some documentaries. Okay, you'll always have to look at the source of the documentary. So these sources are unreliable because they offer opinions or interpretations about marijuana that are often only assumptions or hearsay. They might not be they might not be factual. Okay, so what you think you know about marijuana may or may not come from a reliable source. So to evaluate your knowledge about marijuana, we're going to play a game called Fact Check. And because we're not in person, we're going to have to do it a little differently. I'm going to read you the statements, and I just want you to think in your head, is it a fact or is it fiction? And then we will talk about each one. Okay, so now I'm going to go through and read the statements, and there's quite a few of them, so just bear with me. And I have written the answers kind of, so it makes it a little bit hard to give yourself the chance to think. But we all know kind of what our general belief is, and whether we think maybe we've heard it before and we think it's fact, or we think it's fiction. So just kind of self-evaluate and see if the things that you thought were a fact were actually fiction, or vice versa. Okay, so number 1 is marijuana is harmless because it is natural. Okay, so that statement is fiction. So many drugs are derived from plants. So tobacco is from the tobacco plant, cocaine from the cocoa plant, and heroin is from a poppy plant. So all of these plants are natural, come from the earth, but none of these drugs are harmless. Okay, they all cause harm on the body. Okay, number 2, smoking marijuana weakens the immune system. That is a fact. Okay, so smoking marijuana suppresses the body's immune system. Marijuana smokers are more susceptible to illness and infection than non-smokers. Okay, number 3, smoking marijuana slows the heart rate, so it's relaxing. That is fiction. Okay, alcohol slows your heart rate, but marijuana increases your heart rate by 20 to 50% shortly after smoking. So this effect can last up to 3 hours, and the increased heart rate can reduce blood supply to the heart as well as cause chest pain. Okay, number 4, marijuana is not addictive. Okay, this is fiction. Okay, addiction can be physiological or psychological. Okay, so you can be addicted, your body can be addicted physically, or you could be addicted to or mentally or emotionally. Okay, so regular use of marijuana becomes physiologically, or people become regular users of marijuana become physiologically addicted to marijuana. Okay, emotionally and mentally, users feel that they need to be high. Okay, heavy marijuana users can become physically addicted and may experience unpleasant withdrawal symptoms without regular use. Okay, so their body will physically feel the effects if they don't use. Okay, next one, marijuana use makes users less motivated. Yes, that is a fact. So the lack of motivation is also called amotivational syndrome. Marijuana causes users to lose interest in activities, school, work, personal hygiene, and life in general. Okay, next, the marijuana used by doctors and actors, in movies and musical videos is real. No, that is fiction. Okay, Hollywood spends a lot of money making fake vampires and aliens look real. They do the same with marijuana and other drugs. Okay, so people are not actually using while filming. Next one, marijuana bought from a dealer is pure and contains no other substances. Definitely fiction. Okay, this is not a fact. Marijuana dealers often secretly lace the drug with other substances, including the chemicals found in bug spray, LSD, and cocaine. Okay, we're having a big problem with the drugs being laced and people overdosing and dying. Okay, you probably heard of the drug fentanyl. Okay, that's being used. Elephant tranquilizers, and people are dying. Okay. Marijuana use affects a person's ability to safely drive a vehicle. That is a fact. Marijuana negatively affects a driver's attentiveness and perception of time and speed. So it impairs judgment and motor coordination and slows your reaction time. So marijuana users have an increased chance of being involved in and responsible for collisions. Okay. Fact or fiction, marijuana use can cause forgetfulness. That is a fact. The mind-altering substance in marijuana called tetrahydrocannabinol or THC contains or connects to the receptors in the brain that affect memory. During the high and for weeks afterwards, the user will have difficulty recalling information stored in their short-term memory. Marijuana use suppresses the appetite. Okay, this is fiction. The THC, or the mind-altering substance in marijuana, increases the appetite, causing the munchies. And that increased appetite often results in weight gain, not weight loss. Marijuana users have an increased risk for depression and schizophrenia, especially for teens with a genetic predisposition to either condition. That is a fact. Okay, researchers have found an association between marijuana use and an increased risk of depression or early onset of schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders. And parents' negative attitude towards marijuana use has the most influence on their teens' decision not to use marijuana. That is a fact. Parents are the most powerful influence on their teens' attitudes towards drug use. Studies show that marijuana use is lower among teens whose parents strongly disapprove of drug abuse. Okay, we're going to continue. Marijuana use impairs short-term memory. Okay, that is a fact. The THC, the mind-altering substance in marijuana, alters how information is processed in the hippocampus, which is the area in the brain responsible for memory formation. Okay, fact or fiction. Marijuana smoke can cause respiratory problems. This is a fact. Okay, marijuana smoke consists of a mixture of gases and particulates, many of which are harmful to the lungs. Regular marijuana smokers may have respiratory problems such as a daily cough or phlegm production, frequent acute chest illnesses, and a greater risk of lung infections. Okay, they're also seeing a big problem with vaping and THC, causing very, very major problems with people's lungs and death. Okay, there's a very big correlation between the two. The next one, marijuana use impairs concentration and balance. That is a fact. Okay, so the THC blocks receptors in the brain that regulates concentration and balance. Next, marijuana users always know what to expect when they use the drug. So this is fiction, okay? The effects of using marijuana can be unpredictable. Marijuana can affect each person differently depending on genetics, marijuana potency, so how much they took, or the potency of the THC, or the experience with the drug and how it's taken. Okay, so very unpredictable. Marijuana use interferes with critical thinking and problem solving. That is a fact. Okay, the THC acts on receptors in the brain. Normally, these receptors are activated by brain chemicals that are part of a neural communication system. So marijuana activates this system, disrupting concentration, problem solving, learning, and memory. Okay, marijuana smoke is safe. No, that is fiction. The smoke from marijuana contains some of the same cancer-causing substances found in tobacco smoke. The heat alone from one marijuana joint equals the heat of 20 cigarettes. Okay, marijuana contains a chemical that changes the way the brain works. That is a fact. The chemicals that marijuana contains is THC. It's the mind-altering substance, and just like alcohol, marijuana impairs the brain. Okay, marijuana use will damage the developing teenage brain that is still under construction. Remember, your brain is still developing into your mid-20s. Marijuana use does not affect academic performance or achievements. Definitely fiction. Students who use marijuana will get lower grades. They're more likely to drop out of high school, lose interest, and lose track of their goals. Marijuana use during pregnancy does not affect the developing fetus. This is fiction. A pregnant woman who regularly uses marijuana may give birth prematurely to an undersized, underweight baby. Studies also suggest that prenatal use of marijuana may result in birth defects. So that's prenatal, mental abnormalities, and increased risk of leukemia in children. Okay, we have 3 more to go. High doses of marijuana can cause psychosis or panic attacks. That is a fact. Studies have shown that some users experience an acute psychotic reaction or panic attacks under the influence. And marijuana use does not interfere with athletic performance. Okay, that is fiction. Marijuana affects your timing, movement, depth perception, and coordination, which can negatively affect athletic performance. Okay, and lastly, K2 or spice is safer than marijuana because it is quote unquote fake weed. Okay, so this is a fiction. So synthetic or man-made marijuana, or what they call spice, is essentially a poison with unpredictable effects. Spice users report side effects including vomiting, confusion, and hallucinations. It has also been linked with heart attacks and death. So did any of these answers that I just read, did any of them surprise you? So we explored the facts about marijuana and the effects that its use can have on the body and the brain. Think back to your lesson on the effects of alcohol. Okay, think about when we talked about when the brain stops developing. Okay, so that's right. The brain continues to develop until we are in our mid-20s. So THC, or the tetrahydrocannabinol, interferes with the healthy development of the brain. Okay, so we're going to take a closer look at how the different areas of the brain are affected. Now these scans that I have here illustrate brain activity, kind of like the same scans that we looked at in the alcohol lesson. These scans, however, show the underside of the brain. Okay. Who can tell me or what you think, or which one you think is the active, healthy brain, and which one is the less active brain because of marijuana use? Okay, so you're right. On the left is the healthy brain. On the right is the brain of a 28-year-old weekend marijuana user. Okay, so you can see it looks almost like there's holes. It's maybe not symmetrical, the brain on the right, the brain of the marijuana user. So it appears lumpy, where the healthy brain looks smooth. There's no presence of holes. So the one on the right, they're actually not holes, but they're actually brain cells that have been damaged. Okay, so what you're not seeing, or the holes, where it looks like you're seeing holes, it's actually brain cells that have been damaged or that have a reduced activity. So the THC in marijuana attaches to the cannabinoid receptors throughout the brain. It is this attachment that lets marijuana affect so many different functions of the brain. Okay, so now we're going to look at the effects of THC on the brain. The diagram here shows or identifies some of the areas of the brain that contain large numbers of cannabinoid receptors. And the table to the right of the diagram explains that what each area of the brain regulates and how this area is affected by THC. So the first one we have here is the neocortex. Okay, so the neocortex is responsible or regulates our conscious thought, our spatial reasoning, and our sensory perception. The use of THC, or the effects of THC in this area, are altered thinking, impaired judgment. And the next one down is the basal ganglia. Okay, the basal ganglia, it regulates and initiates movement. Person who uses marijuana has a slowed reaction time, and they have a reduced motor activity. Okay, the hypothalamus is responsible for hunger and thirst. but THC increases your appetite. When when someone is using marijuana, they have an increased appetite. The amygdala is another area of the brain, and it regulates emotions, emotional behavior, and motivation. Someone who is using marijuana, the effects of THC can cause panic attacks and reduce motivation. The hippocampus is the part of the brain where we form our new memories, and our memories holds our memory storage and recall. Okay, so using marijuana makes it harder to learn and recall information. Okay, the spinal cord regulates the pathways of messages between the brain and the body. THC can actually alter your sensitivity to pain. Those receptors or those pathways are interfered. So you might not be realizing that, or getting the signals to your brain that you are in pain. And the cerebellum. Okay, the cerebellum is responsible for regulating balance, posture, and coordination. Okay, and someone who's on marijuana, the effects of THC are impaired coordination. So we see how THC negatively impacts the areas of our brain. I want you to think now about how marijuana use can affect a person's performance at school. Remember, the effects of THC, one of those that we talked about is a lack of motivation. Also, making it harder to learn and recall information. So that's going to greatly impact your performance in your schoolwork. Okay, how about marijuana use in a person's ability to drive a vehicle? Okay, remember, marijuana or THC alters your thinking, impairs your judgment. It may be your reaction time is slowed. Maybe you see a stop sign, but you don't react in time, and you run the red light. It also impairs your coordination. Okay, so those can all affect your ability to drive a vehicle safely. And how about marijuana use affecting a person's relationship with their friends or family? Okay, so THC alters your thinking, impairs your judgment. You're not making the same decisions, or maybe thoughtful decisions. Okay, so that can directly impact your relationships and your friendships, and cause friction between them. And lastly, think about how all of these negative effects can interfere with a person working to reach their goals. Think about how it can lead to someone losing track and focus of the goals that they're trying to achieve. So now that we know the physical effects that THC and marijuana can have on our brains, let's look at how marijuana use can affect different occupations. So I listed some of these important occupations here. We have surgeon, airline pilot, auto mechanic, construction worker, pharmacist, child care worker, 911 dispatcher, and a student. So what if I asked you to rank these occupations? So rank the occupation in order of whose job performance would be the most affected by marijuana use to the least affected by marijuana use. I'll give you a couple seconds to kind of think which one would be affected the most, and rank them from the most to the least affected by marijuana. You might need to pause the video. So probably most of you thought that this task was kind of a hard one, right? So why do you think you're having such a difficult time trying to rank these occupations? Well, every one of these occupations could be affected if the person used marijuana. So what job skills do you think are most impaired by marijuana use? Okay, so we're going to just kind of go over these occupations and how marijuana use could impair these skills. Okay, a surgeon. Okay, a surgeon depends on accurate depth perception and sensitive motor skills when performing surgeries. They also need to be able to react quickly if there's a problem. Airline pilots are responsible for many people, not only the passengers, but also people on the ground. Pilots need good depth perception, reaction time, and concentration. Auto mechanics. So mechanics need focus and concentration when working on a vehicle. Forgetting to tighten a bolt or improperly repair a system would leave the car unsafe to drive. Okay, so people could get in motor vehicle accidents due to this lack of concentration and focus. Construction workers. Construction workers are responsible for everything from the heaviest earth mover to the smallest nail. Okay, they have to be able to focus on the smallest detail and not forget any steps in the process. Pharmacists. So pharmacists are responsible for filling the correct prescription for the correct person. An error in dosage or labeling could prove fatal. Okay, so someone could die due to that mistake. Childcare workers. Okay, childcare workers are often responsible for many different children at one time. The ability to make a split-second decision and react on a moment's notice keeps children out of harm's way. Okay, 911 dispatcher. A dispatcher must react quickly and with concern about the caller. They need to send help immediately, not whenever they feel like it. Okay, they're on call. And a student. So being a student is an occupation. So you guys, your job right now is to go to school and to be a good student. Marijuana use interferes with learning. So if we don't have students, we won't have any of these other occupations. Okay. So our goal here again at SCAZA is to just make sure that you stay on track, you stay focused so that you can reach your goals. That's why we're here to talk to you about the negative effects and of the drugs and the substances like marijuana and nicotine and alcohol. Next week we're going to talk about over-the-counter and prescription drugs and also street drugs. Okay, so we're here to give you that information so that you can see the negative effects and how it can impact your lives, and so that you can make good choices. Research consistently shows that recreational marijuana use is harmful to the developing teenage body and brain. It isn't something safe to put into your body, and for this reason it will remain illegal for teenagers to use regardless of the legal status of use for adults. Okay, so that is the end of our lesson. I just wanted to put our email out there again. If you have any questions or concerns or comments about this lesson and the effects of marijuana, you can email us at scazaprevention@gmail.com. Also, I'm going to put a reliable source of information on drugs if you're interested, and it is the National Institute of Drug Abuse, NIDA. And it is filled with factual information on drugs. Okay, so next week we will be talking about the harmful effects of street drug use and the misuse of prescription and over-the-counter drugs. Okay, until next time, I hope you have a great week.